The exact moment the clerk at the registrar's office informed me that my marriage certificate was a forgery, Leo Vance was across town at a press conference, holding a small boy who looked uncannily like him and proudly announcing the child as the sole heir to the Vance family fortune. I tried to call him, 99 times in total. Everyone in that room knew because his phone, sitting on the podium, lit up with my name over and over again. He simply silenced it, a casual flick of his finger that dismissed me as if I were nothing more than an insignificant annoyance. Seeing him look so calm, so completely unbothered while my world was imploding, was the final straw. The tears I had been holding back finally began to fall. 4 years of what I thought was love, and this was the result. In that moment, I let it all go. I went home, burned the fraudulent certificate in the kitchen sink, and walked away from the life we had built without a single glance back. From that day forward, there was no Mrs. Vance. Not long after his press conference concluded, a message from Leo appeared on my phone. "Come see me. I can explain." I stared at the words for a long time, a tired, bitter smile touching my lips. Explain what exactly? That our marriage was never legally binding? That he had concealed this fundamental truth from me for 4 entire years? A tiny, stubborn part of me wondered, though, what if he genuinely didn't know the certificate was fake? Clinging to that last fragile thread of hope, I drove to his office. I had barely reached the main entrance to his executive suite when his assistant hurried over, her expression nervous as she moved to block my path. "Miss Evans," she said, wringing her hands. "Mr. Vance gave explicit instructions. No one is to be admitted right now. Miss Reed and the young master are his top priority. I'm so sorry, but that includes you." I stood there, frozen in the hallway outside the heavy, tightly shut doors. Even through the thick wood, I could hear the faint sound of laughter from within. Through the narrow gap between the door and the frame, I caught a glimpse of the scene inside. Leo was cradling the sleeping child in his arms, while his other hand rested gently on the shoulder of his former lover, Sophia Reed. So that was it. In Leo's heart, I had never truly been enough, not when compared to her. Years ago, Sophia had insisted on moving abroad, and on the very night she left, a chance encounter brought Leo and me together. It was only after that night that I was even allowed into his orbit. A year later, he flew me to a remote, deserted island and proposed to me under a ridiculously large pink banner that read, "I love you." I had teased him for being so tacky, but truthfully, my heart had felt nothing but pure, unadulterated happiness. After we were married, he once fell asleep in my arms, drunk and vulnerable, and whispered about how much he wanted a child. I took his words to heart and began trying everything I could to conceive. Then, less than a year after that conversation, he abruptly announced that he didn't want children anymore. I respected his wishes and abandoned the painful IVF treatments I had started. I channeled my maternal energy into opening a small preschool, pouring all the love I had into the children there, treating them as if they were my own. But now, it seemed everything could have been a lie. The marriage certificate, and perhaps even the love I thought we shared. I took a deep, steadying breath, wiped the tears from my face, and turned to leave. Just as I did, the office door swung open. "Clara Evans, is that really you?" Sophia's voice was filled with a theatrical surprise, as if she had no idea that I had been married to Leo for the past 4 years. Of course, how could she have known? Early in our relationship, I had pleaded with Leo to post a single photo of us on his social media, but he had always brushed it off, claiming he only shared genuinely meaningful moments. Yet his feed from before me was filled with pictures of Sophia. I had pretended not to understand the implication, but deep down, I knew the truth. He just didn't want Sophia to find out about me. I turned around slowly, deliberately ignoring the smug look in Sophia's eyes, and focused all my attention on Leo. He lowered his gaze, refusing to meet mine, and gently pulled Sophia behind him, physically blocking me from stepping any further into the room. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cold and distant. Ever since Sophia had returned from overseas last month, Leo had been leaving for work earlier and coming home later. When I had tried asking his friends where he was, they treated me like a complete stranger. Not a single one of them acknowledged me as his wife, or would even make a simple phone call on my behalf. I had felt his growing coldness day by day, but had refused to believe what it meant. I kept telling myself that maybe I wasn't doing enough. So I worked even harder to be the perfect partner, to maintain our home. And still, he treated me like this. Maybe it was finally time for me to let go. I didn't mention the text message he had sent. I was just passing by, I said simply, and turned to leave once more. Stop lying to yourself, Sophia called after me with a smirk. Who just passes by the CEO's office? Come on in, Clara. She grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong, and tried to drag me inside. I cried out as a sharp pain shot through my arm. It was an old injury that had ached for years. Let go of me, I gasped. To my astonishment, Leo rushed over, his eyes filled with what looked like genuine concern. He gently took my hand from Sophia's grasp. Are you all right, sweetheart? He asked, his voice soft. For a brief moment, he tried to put on this affectionate act, pretending to care for me deeply. But if he had truly cared, he'd had 4 years of opportunities to explain things. He had chosen silence, allowing me to face this public humiliation all alone. I pulled my hand away from his grasp, ignoring the way he winced as he quietly rubbed his own wrist where I had shaken him off. Sophia stood frozen, her face pale with disbelief. She stared between the two of us and stammered, Wife? You two are married? The veins on Leo's forehead bulged. I noticed beads of sweat forming near his hairline and felt a strange, twisted sense of amusement. He must have been incredibly anxious to have such a visceral reaction. He said it by mistake, I said calmly, covering for him one last time. Just a slip of the tongue. But Leo's expression only darkened as I stepped away from him. He was clearly not happy. I suddenly remembered how, when we were getting married, he told me there was no need for us to go to the registrar's office in person, claiming he had connections that would handle it. Now I understood it was all a lie. He was likely afraid I would discover the certificate was a fake. Or perhaps he was even more afraid that, once our union was official, he would have no way back to Sophia. I no longer dared to call myself his wife. Maybe now he could finally be with Sophia, just as he had always wanted. I didn't want to argue anymore. I simply turned my gaze to the child in the room, whose features so clearly mirrored Leo's. My body went rigid. I remembered the early days of my kindergarten when no parents wanted to be the first to enroll their children. It was Leo who had brought this very boy to me, asking if I could raise him from the start. He said he had seen how devoted I was and trusted me completely. After he enrolled his nephew, other parents began signing their children up, and that's how my kindergarten slowly came to life. But I never, not for a single moment, imagined the child was his own son. I looked at him in disbelief, but he wouldn't even glance in my direction. His eyes were locked on Sophia. Leo, I said, my voice barely a whisper. What does this mean? Sophia rushed forward and suddenly dropped to her knees in front of me. If you're angry, be angry with me. Don't take it out on my son. I'm his mother. My heart aches for him. Tears streamed down her cheeks as Leo helped her to her feet, and she clung to him as if she had every right to be there. But I was the one who had raised that child. I was the one who had learned to test the temperature of his bathwater with my elbow, who had learned to mix his formula just right, who had stayed up through countless nights of fevers and tended to his scraped knees, my heart pounding with fear for 4 long years. I had given that boy everything I had. Sophia hadn't lifted a finger, and yet now she had the audacity to claim she was the one in pain. I turned to Leo, desperately seeking a flicker of understanding, but all I found in his eyes was coldness. His earlier concern had vanished completely. You've made enough of a scene, Leo said sharply. I trusted you with him because you were patient and kind. That's the only reason I let you raise him. What happened to you? He then turned to Sophia and added gently, Don't worry, I check in on him every day when I come to and from work. With that, Leo refused to meet my eyes again. He carefully took the boy from the nanny's arms, and in that moment, I could only stand there, watching the 3 of them. A perfect picture of what anyone else would call a happy family. I remembered one snowy day when I had called Leo, asking him to pick me up, because the children had all been dismissed early. He had hung up on me as soon as I mentioned it. I ended up walking home through the biting wind and heavy snow and ran a fever for 3 days. When he finally called, it was only to remind me not to forget the next day's lesson plan. I had assumed he was still upset about an argument we'd had a few days prior. I never imagined he was still coming to the school every day, not for me, but to see his son. I used to believe so foolishly that I held a special place in his heart. I thought his small gestures meant something. But now I knew the truth. All along he had been watching his son, not me. I turned away, wiping my tears as fast as they fell, scolding myself for the years I'd spent raising someone else's child, for giving my all to a life that was never truly mine. 4 years, and this was how it ended. So be it. Even the marriage certificate was fake. At least it wasn't too late to walk away. I no longer wanted to argue. I just wanted to leave it all behind and focus on the kindergarten I had worked so hard to build. Leo would go back to Sophia, that much was clear. But just as I turned to go, Sophia's close friend Chloe appeared at the door, blocking my path. She looked me up and down with a condescending smirk. "No wonder you were asking me about low side effect birth control," Chloe said loudly. "So it was for your little affair." I froze. She was holding a small bottle in her hand, and I recognized it immediately. It was my daily vitamin supplement. Chloe chuckled and turned to Sophia. "Sophia, you have no idea how much Leo loves you. Ever since you went overseas to have the baby, he hasn't so much as glanced at another woman. He only kept Clara around. Every week he would fly over 10 hours just to take care of you and the baby. I have to say, I've never seen a man so loyal. I was so jealous." As she spoke, I saw Leo's face turn pale, his expression growing more and more ashen with every word. There was a time when I would have cried and screamed, demanding answers from him, even pulling out our marriage certificate just to prove a point. But now I had nothing left to show. I just stood there quietly, without a word, without a tear. Leo looked at me, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely uneasy. He quickly turned to scold Chloe. "What are you doing here? Chloe, if you have nothing to say, then leave." Caught off guard, Chloe was silenced and forced to walk out, her face twisted with frustration. Before Leo could say anything more, Sophia jumped in, her voice light but full of hidden malice. "Good thing I used the medicine Chloe developed. If I had gotten pregnant by accident, that would have been a real mess." She turned to me with a smug smile. "Clara, please don't take it the wrong way. Leo only ever asked me for it once. Every other time it was all me. I gave it to him because I wanted to. If you happen to take it by mistake, don't blame Leo. Blame me." With that, she hid behind Leo like a mischievous child, watching me with an expression of pure satisfaction. Leo looked nervous. My silence only seemed to unnerve him more, and without thinking, he blurted out, "Clara, it's not what you think." I didn't cry. I had long since run out of tears. Hearing his weak, pathetic explanation, I could only laugh internally. "Then what is it, Leo?" I asked quietly. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The silence between us grew heavy. When he first said he wanted a child, I did everything I could to become pregnant. I wanted a baby that was truly ours. My health had never been strong, but I visited doctor after doctor, tried every conceivable treatment, and even turned to folk remedies. In the end, I gritted my teeth through the pain and started IVF. But then, without any warning, he told me he didn't want children at all, even though he knew how much I longed to be a mother. I respected his decision and gave up on my dream without a word of protest. What I never expected was that the vitamins he handed me after every intimate moment were actually birth control pills. He made sure I had a fresh bottle each month, always brought to me with a display of care. So that was the truth. He already had a child with her. The warmth he showed me was nothing more than pity. All this time, I had been the fool, thinking he truly loved me. Leo gently pushed Sophia aside and walked toward me. His voice softened, as if I were still the same woman who once hung on his every word. "I had that formula specially made. It has very few side effects. Please don't worry too much." He reached for my hand. "Today has been a lot. Let me deal with everything first and then we can talk. All right?" I stepped back quickly, avoiding his touch. His face, his words, everything seemed rehearsed, as if nothing had changed between us. He still thought I was the same woman who could be soothed with a few gentle words, the same woman who would always wait quietly until he finished dealing with everything else, only to be told in the end that it was none of my concern, but not this time. I had finally learned. I took out the 2 copies of our marriage certificate and looked him directly in the eye. You knew all along that these were fake, didn't you? Before I could even lift them fully, Leo rushed to block Sophia's view. How long are you going to drag this out? He snapped. Just over some fake marriage papers? Is that really why you blew up my phone with all those calls? Yes, he said bluntly, his patience gone. They're fake. So what? We still lived together for years, didn't we? I let out a bitter laugh. Something I had agonized over for so long meant absolutely nothing to him. The sad part was I was still trying to find excuses for him in my mind. Then came a voice from behind them. Leo, come quick. The baby won't stop crying. The sound of the child's wails filled the office. I turned and saw Sophia pacing in confusion, clearly overwhelmed. My brows furrowed. I had helped raise that child with my own hands. A part of me wanted to walk away, but another part couldn't bear the sound of his distress. But no matter how unwilling I was to leave him crying, it didn't change the fact that the child was hers. While I hesitated, Leo had already scooped up the baby with practiced ease, as if he had done it 1,000 times. Sophia leaned on his shoulder and hummed a quiet tune. Leo, she whispered. I was the one who insisted on leaving all those years ago. But now, would you still be willing to be this child's father? Leo said nothing. He just stared at the child in his arms, his expression unreadable, as though he hadn't heard her at all. Sophia had claimed the baby was the result of a one-night stand, but something about that story had never sat right with him. And me, I stood there in silence, looking down at the marriage certificate in my hand. I had chosen the date so carefully, May 20th, a day that symbolized love and forever in our culture. How foolish that seemed now. Sophia had returned, and Leo had officially acknowledged the child as his own. Looking back, I realized I never should have tried so hard to prove that Leo had once loved me. I handed him the small red booklet. Leo, I said calmly, this is my wedding gift to you. The bright smile in our wedding photo faded the moment the lighter clicked on. As the flames began to eat away at the paper, the warmth of our past 4 years disappeared with it. I watched the certificate curl and blacken on the floor. Leo's expression turned frantic. Clara! He shouted. Come back here! You can't just divorce me like this! He stepped forward, his voice shaking with panic. Don't forget, I still have something on you. But I said nothing. I turned away and walked out the door. I didn't look back, not even once, as the document that had defined my life burned to ash. From that moment on, Leo Vance no longer had a wife, and I no longer had a husband. Thankfully, I still had my career. I still had my freedom. Back at our apartment, I packed up everything I owned without much fuss. Within a day, I had moved into the small staff dormitory at the preschool. It wasn't until a full week later that Leo finally messaged me. Why did you take all your things? Even if we're fighting, there's a limit to how long you can storm out. It had been 7 days, and only now did he realize I was gone. He must have been living with Sophia the entire time. I stared at the message for a moment, then calmly blocked his number. Just then, a voice interrupted my thoughts. Miss Evans, where should I put this plant? It was the new male teacher, Alex, holding a pot of flowers and smiling brightly. He was patient and eager to learn, so I didn't mind showing him the ropes. We walked through the preschool together as I explained things to him. When we turned a corner and reached the swings, I stopped in my tracks. This was where Leo had once pushed me late into the night. I still remembered his voice, laughing softly behind me, promising he would still be pushing me on that swing even when our hair turned gray. But in just 4 short years, he had already found someone else to hold. I stood there, lost in thought, staring at the empty swing. Alex seemed to notice the shift in my expression. Without a word, he gently tugged on my arm and coaxed me to sit down. He glanced down, his cheeks flushed slightly, and asked, "Clara, may I call you that?" He looked bashful, but his hand stayed steady as he gave me a gentle push. A sudden, harsh voice rang out from behind us. "Barely a week, Clara, and you've already moved on to someone new." Leo stood there, his eyes locked on the scene before him. The two of us laughing, relaxed. It hit him like a physical blow. For days he had been calling and texting endlessly, receiving no reply. Now, seeing someone else beside me made his stomach twist into a knot. He stepped forward stiffly, glaring at Alex. "You must be new here. Maybe you don't know, but I am Miss Evans' partner. My name is Leo." Alex looked flustered, stepping back in confusion. I almost laughed. Back then, he refused to give me a proper title, trapping me with a fake marriage certificate. And now that I had burned it, how dare he still call himself my partner? I waved Alex away gently. Leo seemed pleased by my gesture. His face softened as he walked toward me and took my hand. "Honey, everything I said before, I didn't mean it. I just wanted you to comfort me a little. I'm apologizing now." "Clara, please stop this. If you want more marriage certificates, I'll get you as many as you want. Just come home with me. I've barely been able to eat since you left." I let out a cold laugh. Leo had always been a picky eater, so I learned to make only the dishes he liked. But even then, all I ever got in return was his sigh, followed by a quiet comment like, "Maybe you should learn from Sophia." Unwilling to give up, I had enrolled in late-night cooking classes just to please him. I came home every night with fresh oil burns on my hands and never once complained. Now, I had no desire to cook for him ever again. I looked him in the eye and gave his words right back to him. "Maybe you should learn from Sophia." Leo froze. It was as if he never imagined I could speak to him that way. Just then, Alex reappeared, this time with the campus security guard in tow. "Miss Evans, the guard is here," Alex called out. The moment the guard saw Leo, he stepped forward without hesitation and began ushering him off the property. I stood where I was, watching it all quietly, and in that moment, I understood something with perfect clarity. When love is gone, the heart no longer feels anything at all. I turned to leave, but Leo grabbed my hand tightly, refusing to let go. He looked at me with disbelief. "Was it you? Did you call security to throw me out? How could you choose to send me away like that?" His eyes were slightly red and his grip trembled with desperation. But I felt nothing but a quiet satisfaction. His voice faltered. "Are you still angry? If you want, we can go to the registry office right now. We can get married for real, right away." Even then, he still didn't understand. It was never just about registering the marriage. It was about me finally letting go. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, a call came through on his phone. It was from Sophia. A child's voice rang out, followed by Sophia's recorded ringtone. "Leo, the baby and I miss you." I gently pulled my hand from his and gave him a calm, polite nod, silently inviting him to answer the call. He hesitated for a few seconds, confused by how composed I was, but then accepted it. "Leo, I don't know what to do. Our son is refusing to eat again." Her voice was panicked. "Can you ask Clara to help? I really don't know how to take care of him." At that, Leo's brow furrowed slightly. He glanced at me, his expression suddenly uncertain. I didn't ask what he was thinking. Frankly, it was convenient. Sophia had called, so I knew Leo would leave, but I never imagined that after he left, he would return with the child. "Clara," Sophia said, as she stood awkwardly in the doorway of the preschool. "You know, Leo has always taken such good care of me. He's never asked me to do anything like this before, so could you please just watch the child for a little while? Once he's older, I'll take him back," she added with a saccharine smile. "Besides, your place is like a daycare anyway. One more child won't make a difference." She stood there with the baby in her arms, glancing helplessly between me and Leo, as if expecting me to agree without question. I was shaking with anger. The way she spoke, it was like I was nothing more than her hired nanny. Leo remained silent for a long time before finally saying, "Clara, you have experience. Just this once. Can you help?" I looked at both of them coldly without a word. I walked to the entrance of the daycare and shut the main gate in their faces. I was no saint. Even as Leo called my name over and over again from the other side, I didn't turn around. I simply walked away with Alex. Since the staff dormitory was inside the daycare compound, Alex, using the excuse of being new, asked me to show him around the neighborhood. We wandered the nearby streets, and as we passed a small lounge bar, he invited me in with a warm smile. It had been so long since I had truly relaxed. Something in his gentle voice made me say yes without thinking. Inside the bar, Alex kept a respectful distance. He asked about my work, curious about the stories from inside the daycare. We talked and laughed together until late at night. When we finally called a taxi to return, we said our goodbyes, and I walked toward my dorm, looking forward to a quiet night's rest. But as I approached my door, I saw a figure sitting on the steps. It was Leo. He smelled faintly of cigarettes. When he saw me, he immediately stood and put out the cigarette he was holding. "I know you hate the smell," he said quickly, "so I only had a few." I let out a bitter laugh. "A few? Or just enough before coming home to your child? You should go. You're not welcome here." I opened the door, ready to go inside without another word, but there was no sound of the door closing behind me. I turned back and saw Leo had shoved his hand into the doorframe in a panic. He winced in pain, his fingers already turning purple from the pressure, but he still refused to move. "Let go," I said calmly. I need to rest." I waited, expecting him to realize how pointless this was, but his eyes filled with tears as he stared at me, overwhelmed with emotion. "Clara," he pleaded, "what happened to you? Why did you change the moment Sophia came back?" He took a shaky breath. "And that guy from earlier, you were out late with him. You're my wife. How could you go out alone with another man?" Wife. I took out my phone and showed him the official record from the civil registry. According to the report, both he and I were listed as unmarried. He opened his mouth to speak, but I had no more patience. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to wake the neighbors. "Leo," I said quietly, "I don't care what you're thinking. The marriage certificate was burned. This is over." I looked him straight in the eyes. "From now on, your time belongs to Sophia and your child. All I ask is this: do not come here again." Leo panicked and blurted, "No, you don't understand. I never said the baby was mine." He tried to explain, but I had already closed and locked the door. That night, Leo couldn't remember how he got home. All he could hear was my voice echoing in his mind. For days, Sophia had been hinting, sometimes gently, sometimes boldly, that she wanted to share a bed with him, but Leo always felt uneasy. One evening, she whispered softly, "Leo, what are you still hesitating about? You weren't like this on the yacht that night." Leo had spent his 26th birthday on a luxury cruise, but he distinctly remembered leaving the ship early. He glanced at Sophia, confused. She took his silence as encouragement and leaned in, resting her body lightly against his. "Leo," she murmured, "after I accidentally got pregnant back then and left, I could never forget you. I missed you terribly all these years." She gently pressed herself against him and added, "Now that Clara has left on her own, we should stop wasting time, don't you think?" Sophia couldn't see the cold look in Leo's eyes. He stepped back, his voice distant. "I have work to take care of at the office." He peeled her hands off his arm and walked out without looking back. The next morning, the preschool buzzed with its usual energy. I stood at the entrance, helping the children through the gate, when I spotted Leo standing nearby. He was holding a large bouquet of flowers, standing upright and still. "Clara," he called out, "last night I saw the photo album you left at home." That album had captured the happiest moments of my life. The time Leo filled an entire truck with blue roses for me. The time he clumsily tried to clean the house just to surprise me. I had left it behind on purpose. I had no intention of taking it with me because the past no longer mattered. But that didn't give him the right to bring it back. He opened the album and began flipping through it, as if the memories alone could fix what was broken. But when he saw the indifference on my face, his voice softened. "Clara, I know it was always you chasing after me. Now, I want to be the one chasing you." He paused, his tone sincere. The child, he's probably not mine. Back then, I was confused. I thought he was, and I brought him into our lives. But now, I realize no one is more important than you. He quickly added, not that I want to chase you just for a baby. We've always been more than that, haven't we? Leo's voice grew more passionate. He leaned down slightly to look into my eyes. Clara, please give me another chance. I won't propose to you on some deserted island again. This time, I want the whole world to know that you are my wife. The whole world. The same man who, when I called him 99 times, stood in front of the entire press and dismissed me as a harassing caller. And now he dared to say this. I gave a faint smile and reached out to take the photo album from his hands. Thinking I was finally softening, Leo took out his phone to call a restaurant. But before he could dial, he looked up and saw me calmly feeding every single photograph into the office shredder. He stood frozen, his eyes wide in disbelief. Dropping to his knees, he scrambled to collect the shredded remains, his eyes rimmed with red. Clara, if you do this, we won't even have memories left. He knelt there on the ground, paying no mind to the people walking by. All he could do was desperately try to gather the tiny fragments. There's no need for memories, I said coldly, because we have no future. Just then, a sharp voice rang out. Clara, how dare you seduce the father of my child? Sophia stepped out of a nearby car. The first thing she saw was Leo kneeling on the pavement. She stormed over and began shouting wildly to the crowd that was gathering. Everyone, look at this! This woman seduced my child's father, and she still has the nerve to teach children. Hearing the commotion, Alex hurried outside. Seeing Leo and Sophia, he instantly stepped in front of me protectively. Can't you tell Clara wants nothing to do with you? He said sharply to Leo. Why do you keep showing up? Then he turned to Sophia. And you, lady, our teacher, Miss Evans, has absolutely no interest in your aging man. Maybe you should take a hard look at yourself instead. Leo slowly lifted his head. When he saw Alex standing protectively in front of me, a dark shadow passed over his eyes. Without a word, he stood up and brushed the broken shards of paper from the floor into his coat pocket. By the time he looked up again, his expression had returned to that polite, refined look he always wore in public. A kid like you, fresh out of school, thinks he can win over my wife? At the word wife, Sophia's gaze locked on me, her eyes burning with resentment. Alex clenched his fists. He stood frozen for a moment, then lost control and swung his fist straight at Leo. The punch landed hard, splitting Leo's lip, but Leo refused to back down. He grabbed a nearby decorative vase and lifted it high, aiming straight for Alex's head. In the chaos that followed, vases shattered, flowers flew, and broken stems covered the floor. The once peaceful reception area was now a mess of petals and glass. Leo, are you hurt? Sophia screamed. She rushed over, trying to shield him, but Leo shoved her away harshly, sending her crashing to the ground. She let out several painful cries, but he didn't even look her way. Seeing this, Sophia turned her fury toward me, her voice shrill with rage. You wretched woman! How long do you plan to cling to him? Hearing her insult me, Alex slapped her hard across the face without missing a beat, then turned back to wrestle with Leo. Enough! I shouted. Leo, panting heavily, finally stopped. His years of boxing training had given him the upper hand. But Alex's head was already bleeding. If they kept going, they would tear my entire kindergarten apart. Everyone, get out. Alex, go to the hospital and have your head checked. Leo turned to look at me expectantly, waiting. Perhaps for a word of comfort, a gesture of concern. But I said nothing. Leo, let me help you, Sophia said quickly, scrambling off the floor and rushing to his side. Leo pulled away from her hand as if it disgusted him, flinging it aside. He pressed his lips together, watching me as I gently wiped the blood from Alex's forehead with a tissue. A bitter sneer tugged at his mouth. What? You can't afford medical care? Maybe I should show you some pity and cover a real hospital bill. When I ignored him again, he turned and left quietly. Sophia, covering her reddened cheek with her hand, bit her lip and followed him out, ashamed and defeated. After that, Leo came to the preschool every day. Sometimes he brought flowers. Other times, he left handwritten letters. I threw every single one away right in front of him. Clara? he asked one afternoon, his voice low and tired. What will it take for you to forgive me? The old me would have answered before he even finished the question. I would have softened the moment I saw the pain in his eyes. But not anymore. The moment I walked out of that office, I let go of all my expectations for him. He never got an answer. Eventually, he left, his shoulders slumped and his spirit broken. But Sophia's harassment didn't stop. She sent vicious voice messages, and even worse, she started mailing animal carcasses to the kindergarten. More than one parent came to complain. Some had already started to withdraw their children. Every day became a battle. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I found Leo passed out drunk at my doorstep, slurring my name under his breath. I was afraid he would cause a scene in the hallway, so I had no choice but to drag him inside. Leo, I said firmly once he was sitting on my couch, I've made myself clear. I don't love you anymore. Can you please disappear from my life? And could you control your friend? Stop letting her smear dirt all over my kindergarten. I forwarded him all the chat logs and photos of what she had sent. The moment he saw them, he sobered up instantly. She's not my wife, he said, his voice shaking. And I had no idea she did this. I haven't even been to her place since everything happened. He took my hand and gently led me to the couch. Then, without warning, he dropped to his knees in front of me. I really was wrong, he said softly. I was fooled too. I should have seen it sooner. He quickly unlocked his phone and played 2 audio recordings for me. After their fight at the preschool, Leo had asked one of his closest friends to get close to Chloe and find out the truth. The friend did not disappoint. In the recording, Chloe's voice was full of disdain. Sophia? She's even better at pretending than I am. Back then, she played Leo like a fiddle, always acting hot and cold, keeping him wrapped around her little finger. Once she heard that he had been with no one but you for the past few years, she panicked. She even had the nerve to slip birth control pills into his wife's vitamins and claim they had no side effects. Nonsense. You take enough of those and you might never get pregnant again. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a gossipy tone. And that child, it's not even Leo's. It belongs to his father. Sophia had her eyes set on becoming his stepmother, said Leo wasn't powerful enough. But then she changed her mind, decided she didn't want to marry an old man. The day after their little accident, Leo called her and she saw her chance. She pinned the baby on him. Honestly, her luck is almost unbelievable. Leo hadn't moved a muscle while his friend spoke, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. He stayed on his knees waiting for me to respond, but I remained silent. He whispered, Clara, I raised my hand to stop him. Then I let out a long, quiet sigh. Whatever drama was unfolding between Sophia and the Vance family, I didn't want any part of it. And yet, I had suffered through it all. Looking back, maybe the real reason I never conceived over those 4 years was because of the pills he gave me. Pills he told me were just vitamins. Leo? I asked, my voice calm but heavy. If you loved her so much, why did you hurt me? If his heart had always belonged to Sophia, then why the fake marriage certificate? Why lead me to believe I had built a happy life with the man I loved? He wiped at his tears, but the redness in his eyes lingered. His voice shook as he stayed on his knees before me. I thought I loved Sophia, he said softly. But then I realized it was you I had fallen for, and that terrified me. I was afraid I would never be the man I was supposed to be. When she told me she was pregnant with my child, I panicked. I was scared you would find out. And since she refused to return at the time, I thought maybe if I raised the child with you, you would grow attached, and maybe then I could stay. When you talked about getting pregnant, I got scared again. You were always so afraid of pain, so I thought it would be easier this way. Sophia claimed her pills wouldn't hurt your body. I believed her. I never imagined it could take away your ability to have children. Clara, please give me one more chance. I'll give you the rest of my life. I'll never ask for children again. If you want one, we can adopt. I'll follow your lead in everything. Please, just please say yes." His eyes were swollen from crying, but after hearing the entire truth, I could only sit there quietly. Just then, a glint of light from the jade Buddha pendant hanging on his neck caught my eye, and a memory surfaced. Years ago, when Leo had just taken over his family's company, he drank constantly to deal with the stress, sometimes until he bled internally. I was so afraid of losing him that I climbed a sacred mountain on my knees to have that jade Buddha blessed by a monk. I remember the words the monk told me, that the meaning of life was not about romance, but about clarity of heart. Now, I finally understood. Back then, my heart belonged to Leo, and I prayed to every god I could find. But now, my heart belonged to myself, and all I wanted was peace. Leo, sensing my silence, fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was one of the ones I had shredded. He had carefully pieced the fragments back together, each one flattened and glued into place. He was trying so desperately to restore what we had, but what he never realized was that not loving someone is just as powerful a detail as loving them. I took the photo from him again and, right there in front of him, tore it apart once more. His face turned pale. He stared at me helplessly, unable to speak. "Leo," I said quietly, "I'm going to sell the preschool. I want to see the world. I want to live for myself. Please stop wasting your time on me." Then I opened the door and gently showed him out, leaving him standing there in the hallway, heartbroken and lost. While I was finalizing the handover of the preschool, I received an unexpected call from the Vance Corporation. They expressed interest in purchasing the preschool, offering 10 times its original market value. Even more surprising, they plan to rename it the Clara Evans Preschool. Still unable to fully let go of that final thread, I went to Leo's office one last time. But before I could reach his door, his secretary hurriedly stepped in to block my path. Her polite but firm refusal was all the answer I needed. There was a time when he would show up out of nowhere on rainy days, holding out an umbrella without a word. When we were hiking through the desert, he would quietly hand me a bottle of water. He used to shield me from the blinding sun, never once asking for a thank you. A year later, I earned my private helicopter license. One day, while flying thousands of feet above the ground, I received a call. It was Leo. His voice came through my headset, calm but resolute. "I found the evidence. Sophia committed several crimes overseas. She's been arrested. She won't be getting out this time." There was a pause. Then he added softly, "It's a clear day today. Perfect weather for flying. Be careful up there." I waited for him to continue, but he fell silent. Just as I was about to prompt him, I heard his voice again, this time choked with emotion. "Clara, if one day I fall ill, would you come see me?" I said nothing for a long moment. As he prepared to end the call, I finally spoke. "I would come," I said, "but only once." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then he whispered, "Thank you, Clara. Just hearing that makes me happy." Through the headset, I could hear his laughter, a bright, familiar sound that reminded me of the days when I first fell for him. But those days were long gone. We were no longer young,